Hi everyone. I wanted to talk a moment about monthly evaluations and how important they are, and really what a monthly evaluation should look like. By now, each of you should have had monthly evaluations given to you by your general manager, so you have a general idea of what they should look like, as far as the form and filling it out, reviewing their numbers from the past month, and those type things. But I want to talk about the things that happen between reviewing those numbers. First and foremost, the evaluations really should be a very, very quality time spent with each individual. If you sit down and you're only going over numbers and dictating to them what they already know as far as what they completed the month with, you've really not done that person any benefit. I always say if the person leaves the evaluation and they feel like it was a waste of time, then it probably was lacking in a lot of the areas that was needed to really get inside, peel those layers back with that individual, and try to get that connection. Some of the things that I did and still do as a leader whenever I sit down with an individual is I try to get them talking. Instead of me just sitting there and dictating to them, I like to get them talking, because I've learned that people will tell you anything if you get them talking long enough, especially if they feel comfortable talking with you. And you'll learn a lot about that person when you do this. Some of the questions, and you guys might be very good at coming up with your own questions, but these are just a few that I like to use to kind of give you an idea of what I mean by peeling the layers back and really trying to get that connection with the individual during this time. I like to ask questions like, tell me how you feel. How do you feel your month went last month? And get them to talking about it. Ask them, what do you think you could have done better? What were you proud of with your last month's numbers? Those type things will get them talking. A lot of times those will also lead to new conversations as well. Another example of a question that I like to ask is, is there something that you would like to discuss with me? Anything that you want to personally talk about. Just get them to open up and talk with you. Any concerns, any positives, any suggestions, feedback of any kind. Okay, so those are the ways. That's the way I usually like to start my evaluations, to just get them opened up and talking. I did evaluations with one of my managers a couple of years ago, because the manager had asked me to sit down with them and do the evaluations myself, so that they could observe me doing them, so that they had a good idea of how the evaluations should go. Mainly, the reason they did this was because at their prior company that they worked for, when there were evaluations done, you only heard negative. So the only time you got an evaluation is if there was something that negative that needed to be pointed out. In other words, something needed to be corrected. So they had a little bit of a difficult time really getting buy-in themselves on doing the evaluations. And so once we sat and that person was able to observe and saw how I got the person to really open up and share information, they actually expressed, wow, that was a huge eye-opener for me. And actually, one of the things that they also learned from sitting and doing the evaluations with me and listening to his own team talking to me, each one individually during these evaluations, was he found out, wow, I didn't realize how unapproachable I am as a manager. And so that was like a huge aha moment for him. It was an aha moment for me, because I also didn't realize that they didn't really view him as real approachable. And the reason was not because they felt that he was not willing to listen or he wasn't there to support them, but the big comments that we heard all throughout the time was, well, he's always so busy, and so I do, go to this person or go to that person. Or when they would talk about someone who had specifically helped them that month, it was never the manager. It was always someone else in the store. So that person grew tremendously, meaning that GM grew tremendously from sitting and listening to these people talk in the evaluations. And honestly, that's the same kind of information or feedback you want to try to get from your own team when you're sitting with them If you ask questions in the right way, just getting them talking, then they're going to open up and they'll say things, because I guarantee you none of those people felt that they were putting that feeling across to the GM, but they were in hidden words. That was what was coming out of it. So the store grew tremendously just from that particular month of evaluations by doing that. So some of the things that I like to talk about with, as far as how do you prevent the person from leaving the evaluation and feeling like it was a waste of time. That's the big question, because I promise you, if you sit and just go over numbers, they will leave feeling that way. So I always like to go into the evaluation with the mindset and the focus of finding at least one area that can be improved, and then helping them figure out how to improve it. Because if I don't bring any value to the table, then it's a waste of time, right, to sit with me. So an example of that would be in one of my stores, and this has actually happened in 2 of my different stores with 2 different sales associates, in sitting and listening to the evaluation, listening to them talk about their month, listening to the manager talk about areas that they were lacking in. The subject of in-home design came up, and they discussed the fact that there were not very many in-home designs being scheduled by that individual, and we were asking why. And it, in listening to the salesperson, I discovered that they were talking in-home design a tremendous amount, but the problem was they were not ever asking to close it. In other words, schedule the IHD. They were talking about how great it was, and we offer this, but then they would just wait, and if the customer didn't say, okay, yeah, I'd love to do that, then it was just assumed they didn't want it. So from them, they're like, oh my gosh, you're right, that is true. I don't do that. And literally within the next week, both of those individuals ended up scheduling like 2 and 3 house calls when they had not done any prior to that. So that was huge. And again, it was one simple thing, but they left that evaluation feeling like, wow, they had something new that they could try. And then what was even better is when it worked, and then they were able to reach back out and say, oh my gosh, you're right. Thank you for suggesting this. I did it, and I've got 3 house calls this week. So that's what I mean by trying to make sure that the individual does not leave feeling like it was a waste of time, there was no value to it, okay? The other thing that I always like to point out is no matter how good the individual is, even if they're your top performer, always give an evaluation. You don't want to pass by that month because you think, oh, that person does great, I don't need to talk with them. Because I will tell you from my own personal experience, when I was in the store still selling, my manager did that to me. They didn't give me an evaluation because I was the #1 performer most months that I was there, and they just felt it wasn't necessary. But I actually wanted that. I needed that. When we are top performers, we want to know that you think we did a great job, or you also want to know that they recognize it and that they're there for you, and to at least just have that one-on-one time of conversation, even if it's not about what they could do better, but maybe about, where do you see your future? What are you looking for, with Hudson's? Where do you hope to see yourself in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years? It could be personal, or it could be about business. It doesn't have to be growth with the company. Talk to them about, what's your personal goal? They might want to tell you about, they want to go to Paris, or they want to go to Hawaii, and that's their goal, or they want to buy a new home, or they want to retire by age 50, whatever it might be. Just the fact that you sit with them and you take the time to show them that you care goes a long way with building good teams in your store. So it's always important to never leave that person out. And again, I always say, if you don't have any value to add to that person, then how can you lead a whole team if you can't add value to your top person in your store? Okay, so always keep that in mind. You guys watched a video, or should have watched a video a few sections ago, where it's Andy Stanley talking about how to lead when you are not in charge. and they talk about self-leadership. And to me, these evaluations is a perfect time to really look in the mirror and ask yourself, do I really do everything I can to make these evaluations the most effective to really build and help my team and to show them that I care and support them? Okay, so I hope this helps. Anytime, reach out. We're more than happy to help you. During your MIT time frame, you should do some of the evaluations yourself with your team, with your GM or myself or your regional, so that we can, give you constructive feedback, because that's how we grow and become better. Okay, thanks.